The night began like any other in the quiet suburban neighborhood, until the scream came from inside the old brick house at the end of Willow Street, sharp, desperate, and quickly swallowed by silence. Inside that house, 14-year-old Eli Carter sat curled beneath a wooden desk in the storage room, knees pulled to his chest, his breath shallow as he listened to footsteps outside the door. The handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. Above him he could hear muffled voices arguing, but the words were broken, distant, as if the house itself refused to let them reach him. What Eli didn't yet understand was that the door wasn't just locked from the outside. It was being guarded by fear, by silence, and by something far more complicated than he could name. And in that moment, alone in the dark, he made a silent promise to himself he would not cry anymore, no matter what happened. Earlier that evening, things had seemed almost normal. His father had been in a rare good mood, laughing too loudly at a television show that no one else found funny. His mother had been moving through the house like a shadow, quiet, careful, avoiding eye contact. Eli had learned over the years that silence often meant trouble more than shouting ever did. That was father told him to clean the storage room and stay there until I call you. Eli obeyed without question. That was how things worked in their home. Simple instructions, no explanations. But something in his mother's eyes lingered as she passed him in the hallway. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something heavier. Regret, maybe, or a goodbye that hadn't been spoken aloud yet. Eli didn't know it then, but that look would stay with him longer than anything else in his life. Hours passed inside the storage room. The small bulb flickered like it was struggling to survive, casting broken shadows across stacked boxes and forgotten furniture. Eli tried counting his breaths, tried thinking about school, about anything normal. But the house kept speaking in its own language. Floorboards creaking above, a chair scraping violently, then a sudden crash that made his entire body freeze. Then silence again. That was the worst part. Silence meant waiting. And waiting meant imagining things he didn't want to imagine. At some point, he realized the door had been locked from the outside, not just closed, locked. That detail settled into him slowly, like ice forming in his chest. Outside the house, the neighborhood remained unaware. Porch lights glowed softly, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. Life continued as if nothing was wrong. But inside, time felt different, thicker, heavier, almost alive. Eli began to notice small details he had ignored before. The smell of dust mixed with something metallic, the faint vibration of footsteps pacing above him, and once, just once, the sound of his name being called. But not by the voice he expected. It sounded like his mother, or maybe his memory was playing tricks. He pressed his hands over his ears, unsure whether he wanted to hear more or never hear anything again. The turning point came when the storage room door suddenly shook violently, not from outside but from within the house itself. A crash echoed, followed by hurried movement. Eli crawled backward instinctively as the lock clicked. For a terrifying second, he thought someone was coming in. Instead, the door stayed shut, but something slid beneath it. A small flashlight. It blinked once before rolling to a stop near his foot. His hands trembled as he picked it up. And then he heard it. A whisper, faint but real. "Stay quiet. I'm trying to help you." It was a woman's voice, not his mother, someone else. Confusion overtook fear for the first time that night. Who else was inside the house? Before he could process it, the storage room door opened slightly, not fully, just enough for a narrow beam of light to cut through the darkness. A woman in her late 30s crouched outside. Her clothes were disheveled, her face bruised, but her eyes were steady. "My name is Nora," she whispered. "I work nearby. I heard something. I came in when I saw the back door open." Eli didn't understand how she got inside or why she wasn't afraid, but something about her presence felt like oxygen after drowning. Still, the danger wasn't gone. Somewhere in the house, heavy footsteps resumed. They were coming closer. Nora acted quickly. She pulled Eli out and guided him through a narrow hallway that smelled of smoke and broken wood. Every step felt like walking through a place that was collapsing silently around them. Eli saw things he would later struggle to forget. A shattered vase, overturned furniture, a photograph cracked down the middle, and in the middle of it all, a man's voice shouting in frustration, not far away. Nora pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence, and led him toward a side exit. But just as they reached it, the front door slammed open. The house filled with shouting voices, Not of one man, but of many, neighbors, police, strangers drawn by the disturbance that had finally become impossible to ignore. Everything after that became a blur of motion and sound. The man was restrained. The house was emptied. Lights flashed. Radios crackled. But Eli barely noticed any of it. He stood frozen beside Nora, still gripping the small flashlight like it was the only real thing left in the world. When a paramedic tried to guide him away, he hesitated. Not because he didn't want to leave, but because he didn't understand what leaving meant anymore. Nora knelt beside him and gently said, "You're safe now." But Eli, in a voice so small it barely existed, asked the question that changed everything. "Why did you come inside if the door was locked?" Nora looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because locked doors don't always mean no one is inside," she said softly. "Sometimes they mean someone is waiting for help." That sentence settled into Eli's mind like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time he realized the truth. He hadn't been forgotten. He had been found. And more importantly, someone had chosen to enter danger not for reward, not for obligation, but simply because another human life might be inside needing saving. Days later, Eli sat in a foster care home near the edge of the city, the world outside quieter but unfamiliar. The legal aftermath of the night was something adults spoke about in hushed tones. He didn't fully understand all of it yet, but he understood enough. His life had split into before and after. What stayed with him most was not the fear, but Nora's choice. She had no reason to enter that house, no guarantee of safety, no promise of outcome. Yet she did, and in doing so, she had rewritten what kindness meant for him forever. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Eli began to speak more, to sleep without waking in panic, to believe that silence did not always mean danger. One afternoon, he asked to visit the old neighborhood. The house on Willow Street was still there, but it no longer looked alive. It looked like a memory that had been emptied of its weight. Standing outside the gate, Eli realized something unexpected. The door had not been the most important part of that night. It had only been a barrier. What mattered was what existed on both sides of it, the fear inside and the courage outside. Before leaving, he placed the small flashlight on the steps of the house. It no longer worked, but it didn't need to. It had already done its job. As he turned away, he noticed a note tucked beneath a stone near the gate. It was from Nora. Just a few words. "One day, you'll be the one who opens the door for someone else." Eli read it twice, then folded it carefully and kept walking. Years later, Eli would grow up to become someone who worked in emergency response services, answering calls that most people would ignore or never hear. And every time he stood outside a locked door, listening for signs of life inside, he remembered that night. The fear, the silence, the flashlight, and most of all, the stranger who chose to enter when no one else would. He understood then that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. And sometimes, the most important doors are not the ones we open with keys, but the ones we open with compassion. And somewhere deep in his memory, he still hears Nora's voice, calm and steady. Locked doors don't always mean no one is inside.